Hey everybody, I'm Seth Adams. I'm the co-chair with Mark Thompson of Thousand Friends of Martinez. And we really appreciate that you've made it this evening on a December when we've all got plenty of better things to do despite sheltering in place. We want to make an apology, which is that we advertised several times that this meeting would be tomorrow. But the city changed its city council meeting based on the election results being delayed a little bit. They're doing the installation tomorrow of new council members and the retirement of the old council members. And so we didn't want to conflict with that date. And just a week ago, we let people know that we were changing the meeting date to a day early. So sorry about that. If you haven't been to a Thousand Friends of Martinez meeting before or paid much attention to us, we started 3 election cycles ago, basically 5 or 6 years ago, with the intention of trying to elect better candidates in Martinez. We're a political action committee. We're not a nonprofit. And our #1 goal is electing better candidates in Martinez. We've got 3 main focuses: conservation, quality of life, and good government. And so all of our activities are focused in that direction. Tonight, we're really lucky that new council member Brianne Zorn, who we endorsed in the November election, will be talking to you about what it's like to run for council. We're going to, she'll be following me immediately after I finish. We're going to do a little update on the general plan process. We might have a quick update about redistricting. Then Brianne's going to come back and talk about grant funding and what's happening down by the marina and the waterfront. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about the election results and what some of it means. So Brianne, if you're ready to go, Mark will make you host and you can start your presentation. You've got about 15 minutes.
Sounds good. Thank you. Perfect. All right. Can you let me know when you are able to see my website?
You can see it.
Perfect. Okay, excellent. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to speak tonight. I really appreciate it. As Seth said, November 3rd was a big day for me. I was initially elected to be District 3 Representative City Council for the City of Martinez. I did have to wait until November 30th to prove that that was the case. This year, there were a lot of ballots that came in by mail, and so it took quite a bit longer, I think, for them to make that final call of the election. But I am officially the District 3 City Council person, so I'm really excited to speak tonight, and I'm very excited to be officially sworn in tomorrow evening. So anyone that is on the call tonight, if you're interested in participating in that swearing in ceremony, or I guess just Zoom call tomorrow evening, all the agendas have been posted on the city website, and you can search for that and you can call in. It will again be at 7 o'clock tomorrow evening. So I wanted to talk about what it's like to run for city council. For those of you in the know, which is most of the people on the call, you know that the city of Martinez has had at-large elections for years and years and years and years. And in 2018, under threat of legal action, they created new districts. So I wanted to start the conversation with what exactly that means and why that means that this election was different than what has happened in the past. So in the past, what an at-large election means is that there were 4 city council member seats and 1 mayor. Everyone could vote for all of these positions. The mayor and, well, I guess all the city council positions were 4 years of service at a time, and 2 seats came up every 2 years. And so you got to vote for 2 people at a time. What that meant is as a candidate, you had to run for office to represent 37,000 people. In 2018, when they switched these over to district elections, whether or not you support district elections is kind of a different conversation. But what that means is that you now only have to run to be elected by a quarter of those people. When it was passed in 2018, districts 1 and 4 were up for election that fall. So they have already gone through the district election process once. But people who live in District 2 and people who live in my district, District 3, have never voted in a district election before. So many of my constituents didn't even know what I was talking about when I asked them what district they were in. So you can see here on the map, the 2020 election represented District 2 and District 3 here. And that was what the election was for. Again, like I said, depending on how you feel, or setting aside how you feel about district elections, to me, the biggest takeaway for a district election like this is that the financial considerations and the time considerations of reaching a fourth of the city's population means that a district election is more accessible. So one of the arguments for district elections is that it will help to support underrepresented populations of people to run for office. A lot of people have been arguing in a couple of different ways on whether or not that was successful in Martinez. That said, if you only have to spend a quarter of the amount of money in order to be able to run, that means it's more accessible to everyone. And the first step on getting new representation in organizations, entities like a city council, is to make sure that it's actually something that everyone can do. So I feel very strongly that district elections are a good thing because I was able to do it and it was a very accessible thing for me. That said, those of you who haven't maybe spent a lot of time with this particular map, you'll notice that the districts are very strange shaped and they don't really make a whole lot of sense. And so we talked about this during the forum back in whenever that was, October 6th it was, right? Is that these districts were drawn the way that they were because of where the existing city council members lived. And so this is something that I have every intention that I'll be voting on very early on in my tenure, is to vote for an independent redistricting commission. So in other cities where they've converted over to district elections, they've followed the rules a lot more closer. The districts are more globular. Neighbors and neighborhoods are all in the same district, rather than like where I live downtown, there's thin stripes of just a couple of blocks apiece. And that's because that's where the city council members lived, and they wanted to ensure, that they were able to maintain their seat after their districts went in place. So I just want to show this map. This is always where this conversation starts. And I think it's really good for people to have this in the back of their mind, so they have a really good understanding of what politics in Martinez means right now. Okay, so now let's go back to this campaign that I ran. So the nomination period, and that means when you can submit your name to run for office, was mid-July through early August. That is for that fall's election. The summer that I decided to run, which was just this past summer, I was talking with folks, and I felt that there were a lot of things that were going on in the city of Martinez, and I felt that there needed to be new leadership. I spent a lot of time talking with people, trying to reach out to see if there were folks who were interested in stepping up, who wanted to run for office. And there was nobody, coincidentally, in my district, District 3, who was interested in running for office. And I realized that for someone like me who's always wanted to run for office, this was the time, this was the opportunity to make my impact on my city. So I decided with some helpful pushing from some folks who knew the way things worked, to go ahead and do it. And so the first step is to file your paperwork. And so I didn't even know how to do that. So I needed a little bit of encouragement. So tonight's talk for me is to go through the things that I did to kind of get me over that initial hump about running a campaign and running for office. Because if you're like me and you haven't actually run for office before, a lot of these words and a lot of these actions are new. And until other people's campaigns start running in full, you don't even know how to compare what you're doing to others, because everyone else is kind of doing it on the side. So I wanted to let you all know that I have made a list, and let me tell you my list. Here are the first steps when running a campaign. 1, have people you trust who support you, people you can talk to and ask questions from. Number 2, pull papers, get your signatures and submit your forms. Number 3, get a bank account. People are going to want to give you money and you're going to need to spend money. Number 4, have an answer to why are you running? Number 5, know the issues, know your issues, be able to talk to things that you care about. Number 6, have a repeatable brand. And then lastly, get out and talk to people. All of these first things that I'm talking about are the things that happen in the first 2 weeks of any given campaign. And then the talking to the constituents is what you spend the rest of your campaign working on, trying to see if you can get people excited about your campaign. So first and foremost, I wanted to show people, I was trying to figure out the best way to kind of share what I'm talking about. And I realized that I documented almost every single thing that I did on social media. This is a campaign that is very different than any campaign that has ever been run. And I am not patting myself on the back. I am just stating facts that anyone that ran for office or participated in any component of the election this year knows that the COVID-19 virus has changed the way we do everything, and particularly campaigns. So I'm just going to go ahead and let people in when I see them, if that's okay, since I'm the one getting the notifications. So, the normal act that people talk about is going door to door and talking with people and knocking on doors. You can't do that in a COVID election. And so, we all discussed and agreed, that social media was going to be the way that we were going to predominantly get to folks. So I thought that today we could look through my website, Instagram and Facebook, and kind of go through some of the images that I posted over the duration of my campaign and kind of talk through some of the actions that I did and talk about the things that I learned during this process. If anyone has any questions, feel free to jump in and interrupt me. So I'll stop now. Does anyone have any questions for me right now, or anything you'd like me to talk to as I go through some of these activities from the campaign? Anybody?
I think you're doing great, Brianne.
Okay. All right. So first things first, the photo that I wanted to share, as I said, I'm have people who support me and pull my papers. So this is a photo that I posted very early on as I was trying to figure out what my content was going to look like. This is a photo of me with my signatures that were required in order to submit my paperwork in order to get on the ballot. You have to do this in this case this year by August 7th. So this was me right before I went and turned in my signatures. What I didn't know is that in order to do that, you have to first set up a meeting with the city clerk in order to get the papers that you put the signatures on in the first place. And that you really have to do, a week or two before the deadline. And those are the types of things that are subtle nuances of campaigns that you kind of have to know, and you can't miss that, right? So the people that I had support me were those 23, 24 folks. You only needed 20 signatures, but I got extras just in case there weren't registered voters on the list once they checked them all. I had those voters that were supporting me on day one, on T minus 5 days before everything even started. So that's super important. There's a whole variety of forms that you submit in addition to all of these signatures. And one of those things are forms that you ultimately have to submit to the Secretary of State in order to start accepting donations. So that's my second thing that I don't have any sort of photo documentation for, but something that's really, really important. I guess we can, I don't actually know how to get to tabs. Here we go. We'll move it over here, is this donate button. So once you start letting people know that you're running for office, they're going to start wanting to give you money. And in order to accept money, you have to set up a mechanism to receive the money. In order to receive the money, you have to have a bank account in order to put the money in. In order to open a bank account, you need to have the appropriate forms submitted to the Secretary of State and a variety of other organizations in order to ensure that you have a committee that is actually able to accept this money. Again, another campaign nuance that doesn't seem to be that big of a deal until you're responsible for filling out this paperwork. And then it gets a little bit scary. There are rules associated with if you exceed a certain donation amount, how quickly you need to submit your forms. The 1,000 Friends was wonderful and donated money to my campaign. One of their donations exceeded the amount where I needed to turn that paperwork around immediately, right? So all of this stuff is just things that you have to learn as you go. One thing that I learned, which is another thing that, you wouldn't have known this, I reviewed all of the state documentation for donations, and you needed to get addresses from anyone that donated over $100. Well, it turns out there's an ordinance in the city of Martinez that anybody that gives over $24, you have to get their address. So there's a lot of subtleties where, one law will supersede the next, or one ordinance will supersede the next. And you have to read all of the paperwork in the packet, and nobody necessarily tells you this. So there's kind of an uphill battle when it comes to learning all the intricacies of getting donations and kind of getting that campaign set up. The next thing I was saying is have an answer to why are you running? That sounds like that's not that big of a deal, but it is a big deal because that's how you feel about the position will resonate with others. And it's also literally the very first thing that you have to submit. So to go back to my photo here, in addition to the signatures, you have to submit by the end of the nomination period your campaign statement for the ballot. That's really scary when you're brand new as a candidate to say everything that you feel from the get-go, and then 3 months later see it in writing to everyone that's in your county. It's a little bit scary. But so that's why it's really important that you have to understand why are you running. And then the other thing that I mentioned was know the issues and know your issues. There's a lot of things that people care about in the city, but they may not be your highest priority. And you need to really think through some of those things and have a good understanding of what matters to you and what you're willing to, argue about. And then have an understanding of the things that maybe aren't your highest priority, but you can at least speak intelligently to them. So as far as I was concerned, I had 4 priorities for the city. And like I said, you do this very early on. So as soon as I had my social media up and running, I started writing what my priorities were, right? So my priorities were parks and the waterfront. My priority was the fair representation and redistricting. My priority was diversity in our city and in our staffing. And my 4th priority was economic vitality and supporting of small businesses across the city. Those were my 4 talking points, and I had those in my campaign statement. I had thought through them, and I immediately had them on my website under priorities the day that my website went live, right? That's important. So the next thing that's on my list was have a repeatable brand. And this is totally just a marketing statement, but it's really important, particularly in a campaign that like we had this year, where I'm not going to get as many chances to speak one-on-one to folks as I would like. So every single touch that I had to make an impact, and it had to be something that was memorable to them. So it was really important to me that this lovely logo that my friend made for me, as the very first thing that I asked for, was repeatable, was visible, and people could immediately connect that logo with me. And so we had t-shirts made, we had signs made, we had posters made, we had a website that had this logo on it. Whenever I did social media posts, at least for the first couple of weeks, I was always putting that logo on, and I was being very careful to stick to my brand as well of this color combination, right? So you can see on most of the things that I produced, that logo and that color combination was repeatable. So that way, when you saw me the 3rd time, each one of those times builds on themselves rather than maybe it registering to you as you having 3 separate interactions. It seemed to work really well for me. And I got a lot of feedback saying, oh, I've seen your signs all over the place, or I saw this, or I saw that. So I know that it worked well. And I'm really proud about how it made my campaign look a lot cleaner and more professional than I think a lot of first time candidates might have had. And then lastly, I talked to constituents. It's interesting because I know I am repeating this idea that you have to just sit at home and that you can't actually talk to people. But I was able to go to the farmers market, almost every single farmers market, from mid-September all the way through to election. Realize that's not that many weeks, but in a campaign when you're very busy, that's a lot of weeks. I was able to walk my district almost twice and drop a postcard off. I didn't knock on doors, but I was able to drop a postcard off onto almost every neighbor. I was able to send 1 or 2 mailers, depending on where exactly you lived. I didn't send a mailer to every single person twice, but I got one definite and another mailer out. I got signs up, both the huge ones and the small ones. I was able to participate in forums. We had a lot of people call in for this one, as well as the Chamber of Commerce Forum, and then a few others that were organized by the Democratic Party. And then I had a getting to know you event that I was really, really psyched on. So this was something where we were able to ride our bikes from one side of the district to the other. And I posted several photos of us riding around town. Ultimately, I think it came to, like 18 to 20 miles worth of riding with our friends. And we had various stops throughout the city where we went and said hello to folks and were able to answer questions and have meet and greets and things like that. And all of these events, while we had to wear masks, were all very, very productive. And I felt like I really got a good handle on what mattered to people in District 3. How am I doing on time, Seth? I have just a few more things, or I can answer questions now.
We've got plenty of time. One of our speakers is sick and
Okay.
you're doing great. So we'll take the time that we need, and then I've got a couple questions for you, and we'll see if anybody else does as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm really proud of this Strava map that I made the day of my Bike My District event, because it looks exactly like my district. So I can I can proudly say that I biked from one side to the other. I'm sure that Linda's not on the call, but she lives over here, and we started all the way over here, and Linda's house was the last one that we did on the loop. So anyways, that was a really fun event. So I just wanted to say just a few more things. What did I learn about running for office that I wouldn't in a million years have thought would have been something that I would have been cared so much about? So first off, don't wait till the nomination period. This is kind of, dumb, don't wait till the night before your essay's due to start your homework assignment. But several people had started their campaigns, months before. And there's one very important reason to start your campaign before the nomination period opens, is that several endorsement organizations actually award their endorsements before the nomination period is over. When I first learned about this, I thought that was complete nonsense, and that's totally unfair. But I also was made to realize that some organizations want their organization's name included in the statement on the ballot. And in order to do that, you need to endorse those people by the nomination deadline, which means you need to interview, have a campaign, and have endorsement interviews weeks before the final deadline, right? So I see both sides of the argument. Something that was totally not on my radar. So I was unable to get endorsements from organizations that would have had that early of a deadline. And for people who are new, that is a very inaccessible component to running a campaign. You don't know what you don't know, and you don't know the organizations that are going to be giving you an endorsement until you start running for office, right? So that's one thing. My second thing I learned, I really was not on board with this going door to door thing. It felt very disingenuous to me, looking from the outside in. I thought, well, with COVID, I feel very uncomfortable. I just don't know how I'm going to do this. But I was encouraged by others who are running for office because they were going door to door dropping off cards, and others said, hey, if you'd like, I can drop off some cards for you. So I had cards made, and I just went ahead and joined them. And after the very first day, I realized that, oh, this is actually, one, it's easy. It's an easy way to get information out to folks. And then two, when there are people washing their cars or gardening or whatever, you have very organic really great conversations with folks. And none of those folks ever felt uncomfortable because I didn't have to knock on the door. It was in their court. They got to decide whether or not they wanted to continue the conversation with me. And so that's why those conversations were so great. So I highly recommend anyone who runs for office, don't delegate all of the tasks of going door to door to volunteers. If you can, try and make sure that you're with the volunteers. So I had one instance where there was like 5 or 6 of us out walking, and someone came up to me and said, there's a guy up here, we're in your district, and he wants to talk to you. So it wasn't on a street that I was dropping cards on, but when I regrouped with my volunteers 10 or 15 minutes later, I went back to his house and we had like a 30-minute conversation. And I know for a fact, based on my text messaging and my forum here with 1,000 Friends a month later, that that guy voted for me. And it was absolutely worth talking to him for as long as I did. And if I had, kind of delegated that entire day to others, I wouldn't have been able to participate in that really great experience. One thing, sorry.
Why don't you stop sharing your screen, make Mark the host again,
Sure.
and keep going, and then we'll ask anybody who wants to ask questions.
Sorry.
And Mark, maybe you could just, since it's a small group, unmute everybody, and if somebody's got a question, they can just speak up.
I will.
But keep going, Bree.
Sure, yeah. So I was just talking about volunteers, and when in a campaign, you don't appreciate how intense and how many things there are to do. And one thing that I really regret not doing on minute one is getting someone I trusted to organize volunteers. I found that I was the one doing most of the volunteer coordinating. I ultimately did have a friend who stepped up and said, I'd like to help you. And whenever she was able to help me coordinate volunteers, it was like a godsend, and I really appreciated it. And I know that, some of the folks like Tim and Seth with 1,000 Friends, they helped coordinate volunteers for me too. And it's so nice to be able to just kind of hand off large chunks of things and have them help you, manage and wrangle people who really want to support the campaign, but there's so many moving parts. Sometimes that's hard to keep track of everything. One thing that I did learn is that campaigns do cost money. You can't avoid it. And just be prepared for that. Asking for money has never been my strong suit, and that was really the thing that made me the most nervous. I think that was why I was always nervous about the idea of going door to door, because to me, I kind of combined the idea of going door to door and asking for money. But it turns out that when you run a good campaign and you have good things to say, people will give you money without you actually having to ask for it. And so I feel like the campaign was really successful because we never really had to, we sent out genuine, calls for money, but I never really had to raise that much. Again, that goes back to the fact that I was running in a district election and I was able to run this whole campaign for just under, $8,000. So because of that, I didn't have to have 3 or 4 fundraising events to get up to a $40,000 marker, right? Like $8,000 is the amount of money that would organically come into a campaign that people are supporting. So that's good. Let's see. I have on my list of things that I learned that I hate social media a lot. And I didn't appreciate how much I was going to hate social media until I was responsible for trying to figure out how to get my posts to post on both Instagram and Facebook at the same time. So luckily, my brother who works in social media and that type of thing, he was able to kind of walk me through a few things. And it was really nice to have some folks that knew more than I did. I always think of myself as being pretty technologically capable, but that I was in over my head a lot of times. I just didn't appreciate the algorithms, I guess, associated with some of these things. It was a lot more complicated even than I'd ever had to deal with, even when I worked for nonprofits. And this is what I did. Facebook made it really difficult this year because of the hacking and everything that had happened in previous elections, that if you were trying to do Facebook campaigns as part of a social or political agenda, they made, there were so many steps that I had to jump through. So it took me about 3 weeks before I actually had a hard copy letter in the mail from Facebook with a passcode allowing me to post political ads on social media. Quite the headache. And then lastly, I just want to reiterate that my repeatable brand was really important. I know I said that at the beginning, but you know, when you're able to look through my feed and you're able to see the things that I was able to do, and you're able to see my signs around town, I'm really proud that we had this very clean campaign that, you know, allowed us to be able to run what I think was a very professional looking campaign for a first go round. And to wrap up, this was my Halloween costume this year. I went as Leslie Note from Parks and Recreation, who just so happened to be used to be the head of the Parks Department and then ran for City Council. So I'm very proud that I have friends that always make fun of me for being Leslie Nope. And this year I finally got to be that character. It was very satisfying. So I think with that said, what questions do people have? What can I answer?
So I was curious, how has your ideas evolved since you started your campaign? You know, you had your 4 priorities and probably some ideas about what you wanted to do. Did you find campaigning that your viewpoint was expanded?
Oh yeah, I mean, that's a great question. There are things that I did not include on my statement because I was afraid they would be, I don't know, offensive, or they would be too strong, or they would be too weak, or nobody cared, or that I didn't have the experience. And then over time, after having lots of conversations with folks, I realized how many people were kind of aligned with a lot of the things that I thought. And I thought that was a really, that was an interesting thing for me. I have always, you know, not tried to start fights with people. When you're, you know, politically divergent sounds pretty strong, but you know what I'm trying to say. When you're not fully aligned on politics, you know, I try not to start fights with people. Well, it turned out that I was able to use that quality of myself, but actually was able to kind of flip it, and it became even more of a powerful quality. So what was really interesting is I was able to let people know when I didn't agree with them, which was very self-empowering. And then by stating what I really did believe in, it helped me connect better with folks too. So I feel like maybe when I started, I was kind of a little wishy-washy on some of the things that I thought, and I was able to kind of solidify my ideas. And I think Thousand Friends is a great example where, you know, I said, I support parks, I support the waterfront. But then over time, you realize that protecting open space in Martinez is so important, and that so many people think that that is a really important issue to be aligned behind, that is a great way to bridge the gap between maybe differing political ideologies. You know, in Martinez, we overlap on at a minimum that issue, and it's a great way to kind of reach across the aisle to other folks.
If you've got a question, why don't you raise your hand physically or unmute yourself and or show your video and raise your hand. Brian, how about you?
Quick, first of all, congratulations, Brianne. I think you're the breath of fresh air this city needs. So my biggest question is, are you in Eastern Martinez or Western Martinez? Are you with the bulk of us over on the east side, or are you down there with all the incumbents?
I'm down there with all the incumbents.
No, so we got to
sure.
go through this if we redistrict, huh?
Yes. No, that was actually something that came up a bunch of times. And if you read my ballot statement, I wrote that. You know, I said that I support redistricting so much that if I vote myself out of a job, I'm okay with it. And I still feel that way. There's kind of like 2 ways that will go. Either one, I get redistricting passed, great, and I run for re-election against everybody else and I don't win, okay. Or I have done what I said I was gonna do and I run against everybody else and then I get re-elected. So it's a win-win either way for the city, in my opinion.
Other questions? Tim?
Could you give an idea of how many social media touches you sent out on Instagram and Facebook and the other, your website and whatnot? Are you talking about 100 different messages out to the public over the month and a half of the campaign, or 20, or do you have any sense?
Let's see. I how would I know that? I'm trying to figure out if I can answer your question. So when you have a paid account through Facebook, they do tell you how many people you've touched with each one of your posts. And so it's interesting because most of my posts would get, like several hundred views or likes or whatever. My Bike My District event got a lot of organic reshares. So that had about like 2,000 touches for each one of those. I think 3 or 4 of those Bike My District related posts all had about 2,000. Otherwise, the 2,000 hit posts were all associated with paid advertising and sponsored.
Okay.
But so that's why I was so excited that my Bike My District stuff was free and you got what you want. So they always, well, I don't know who they is, but I have heard that you need to get to about 5,000 followers in order to have sort of like that organic growth where you don't need to push it along. But for young campaigns that are only a month and a half old, I think by the end I had several hundred followers that were directly following my campaign. I tried really hard not to conflate my campaign account with my personal account, except for every so often I would cross post. But I didn't want to bother my relatives in Texas about my local campaign, so I created this new one. But that definitely is an issue, right? Because if I only have 150 followers, even if all of them reshared it, I'm not going to get the kind of organic reposting that you can otherwise. So I realized, you kind of have to just, I don't know, bite the bullet and pay the man for the duration of the campaign to get some of those sponsor posts out in front of others.
Thanks.
Others have questions?
Yeah.
I have a question.
Mhm.
Hi. Sorry, you guys, a little late. I have a toddler running around.
All good.
So, spoiler alert. This is
if he comes running in, we'll know.
So this is going to come up tomorrow in the city council meeting because I'm going to bring it up. So this is going to be a little bit of a curveball. I'm seeing a lot of issues with COVID and just to walk down the street. I actually argued with 2 people today. So
really?
Yeah, they were very adamant about breathing on us. And so that was obviously a no. Mm-hmm. My child has immune deficiencies, and we already we go in and out of the hospital regularly. So that they met Mama Bear, but I mean, the interaction to me was just so tacky, and it was like, this is not what I'm planning on doing every time I just want to walk him to see the ducks. There's enough space over there, so it wasn't like it was a big deal. However, I'm actually going to demand that the city council members, I don't know, maybe put up signs, start educating people, just making it, showing some leadership a little bit. So my question was like, how would you approach this issue? Especially for parents like me, we can't really do anything. Like, I'm literally stuck at home with Landon unless we can walk to see the train, and then we can walk to go see ducks. That's it. I am going to start getting some therapies in the house for him, which will take some of the stress off of me. But I mean, after the interaction today, I was wondering, like, is it even worth, going for a walk? But then I was like, what about the other moms? Like, is this what we have to go through? One of the women said, if your son was that sick, then you should stay home. And I was like, no, that is not, the rules aren't to accommodate you. They're pretty specific for all of us and to keep people safe. So it was just a very nasty interaction. And there were 2 of them, like 20 feet away from one woman, another one, so anyway, so I'll stop.
That's so frustrating. I'm sorry. I know that everyone seems to be on edge because, I mean, my family has been very lucky through this whole thing. We were able to work from home. We have a backyard, like everything was fine. It's been a long year like everyone else, but it's been fine. And yet, even in this past week, when we realized that we were going to lock down again, like everyone in my family started to lose it, And so I totally understand, that everyone has really high tensions. A lot of small business owners, that run restaurants are freaking out because they were just starting to kind of like pick back up again, right? Right. Hair salons, thank you. Like all of these things that people were finally like, okay, we can figure this out. It's now getting, ratcheted back down again. So I understand that stress. As a city leader, it's really important that we, lead by example. Zoom is a hard way to lead by example because we're all sitting in our own rooms. And so we can't show that we're wearing masks. But I'm kind of with you. I think it's important to, remind everybody that we're not doing this for ourselves. We're doing this for others. And so, I think
the ICU beds that are, dwindling. It's almost like they forget that,
it matters even more now than it did,
backing up as they are walking through. And that was kind of what I sensed the most. It was just this, it felt like, she was devaluing my child's life. And, that really made me mad, obviously, because, he's like the most,
cutest little thing.
So, I mean, it was also unexpected. I can tell you that in a million years, I never would have thought that I would be arguing with some random person, just to walk, I live, within 2 blocks of there. So we were literally just going for a walk that he looks forward to every day. So
We're going to have to move on here a little bit.
Thanks,
And Diane, you had a question?
Yes, I'm sorry I came in late because I forgot about the meeting. Did you already discuss the fishing pier and all that stuff?
No, I haven't crossed that yet. So I think it's in 1 or 2 agenda items. So when we, do you mind if I just answer whatever your question is in a couple of minutes?
Oh, no, that'll be okay. I'll just wait until you're doing the presentation on it.
Okay, great.
I'm going to just ask one last question of Brianne, and then we're going to move on, which is, what do you think the 3 or 4 major reasons are you won versus the reasons that Nora Lee Gipner lost?
Oh. That's a good question. So I'm going to stay with what I said in the very beginning, that this was a very positive campaign, and that, I wasn't necessarily running against Nora Lee per se. I was just running because I felt that people needed a choice, and that it was very unacceptable that, a town of our size would have so many elections that were uncontested. So, that's the angle that I came from. And I would like to say, that the worst my smear campaign ever got was stating a few facts. And so I think that people responded very positively to my positive campaign. That said, I think there were some things that I offered that really resonated with folks. So first of all, I can stand up proudly and say that the demographics of Martinez are changing. There's a lot of young families that are moving into Martinez. And so I think that there were a lot of people in the city that didn't feel that that they didn't see themselves represented on the council. So even though I'm not that young, I am still younger than all of the folks that are currently, serving on city council. And I think that by itself, resonated. That said, I'm not so young that I don't have experience. So I think that I was able to show that I had some professional experience that actually would serve the city well. My experience is not in business. My experience is in science, and people really responded well to that too. Like I said, a lot of people really felt that protecting open space and parks and the waterfront, that was the most important issue for me. And that was the most important issue for a lot of folks. And so the fact that I'm an environmental scientist as my job, and that I've worked in the nonprofit field, that I think really worked well. I listened and I interacted well with folks. I don't know, I never saw Nora Lee out at like farmers markets and things, but that may be more because she was a standing city council person at the time. I'm not really sure if there's any sort of limitations that she had, but I was out there. I was out waving signs leading up to the election. I know that I was present more in the community than she was. But then I also had, more to lose, right? Because most people knew her and they didn't know me. So I had to get out there. And then I think that I made myself known. I know one person once told me signs don't win an election, but in my opinion, signs legitimize your election. And I feel like I had a very legitimate looking campaign. And I was there from day one. And so people, knew that I was there and I was there for the long haul. So those are some of the things that I think that people responded well to.
Everybody thank Brianne for speaking and we really appreciate it. The installation at the City Council meeting and agenda on the City Council website is tomorrow evening. We're going to have a quick update about the general plan, a quick update by Brianne about the marina, and then I'm going to do a short discussion about the election results. So Lynn Stevens, can you bring us up to date on the general plan? And you're muted. Thank you.
I'm going to keep this short, but we've been looking at the general plan for several years now, and the city keeps trying to resurrect a failed draft general plan that is inadequate and needs to be scrapped and started over. The current draft GPU process was started in 2008 with a budget of $600,000. And it has been through 2 consultants and 1 committee effort and still doesn't measure up to a document that meets the city's needs. 1,000 Friends of Martinez delivered a letter to the city outlining our concerns with the current draft GPU more than a year ago, but we have not received a response to that yet. In November, the Martinez City Council voted to approve a new contract drawn up with an outside consulting firm, O'Rourke and Associates of Nevada, for another $25,000. This after awarding the same group $80,000 in 2016. The new contract lacks provisions for public input despite California General Plan development guidelines requiring otherwise. The proposal only includes 1 webinar for a special interest group, 2 planning commission hearings, and 2 city council hearings to present and finalize the plan. Without a conduit for public input, the draft GPU is unlikely to reflect what its citizenry cherishes, including its small town feel and picturesque open space. The draft environmental impact report, which is what the plan is predicated upon, dates back to 2015, and it's old and it does not address new California environmental protections drafted since then. The proposal also fails to adequately address other key issues, including Measure I, drought, wildfire, and sea level rise, despite research indicating impending impacts affecting Martinez. As far as fiscal responsibility is concerned, the plan is short-sighted. One of the most grievous omissions is that there is no shall or will language in the land use element to include uncertainty about providing future revenue. Measure X only provides part of what is needed, and it at best is a stopgap measure that will sunset in 13 years. What we need are general plan provisions that will lay the foundation for replacing Measure X in the future. And it didn't even mention anything that would take us beyond the 13 years that Measure X provided. So the general plan continues to be inadequate. They plan to vote on approval of whatever the O'Rourke and Associates puts together by middle January. So it's not leaving any time for any public input whatsoever.
So this will be one of those things that Brianne is faced with immediately in her beginning role at the City Council. The general plan is basically the land use Bible for what the city should look like in the coming decades. And the city has taken forever to try and update it. And now they're trying to rush the process to get something done, even though they haven't had good citizen input for years. Anything else, Lynn?
That's pretty much it.
We're going to go back to Bree for a quick update about the Marina Pier. And then I'm going to do a short talk about the election results.
Mark, would you mind making me a presenter one more time?
I would be glad to.
Thanks. Oops, not yet. There we go. Okay, so just a quick summary of this. If you haven't been fully aware of this process, it happened, when was the first meeting? Well, it'll tell us right here. It's fine. It was in October was the first meeting. So this is the Prop 68 competitive grant. It's a state of California grant. They offer money for recreational projects throughout the state of California, and they have enough money to authorize grants from $200,000 up to several million. One of the ideas that the city staff had was that our fishing pier, which I'm sure many of you saw this here. Let me go down to this part. Here we go. So our fishing pier had a engineering analysis done on it a couple of weeks ago, and there was a recommendation that it is in such a state of disrepair that it might become a hazard to the public, and it could have been considered to be closed to the public. The city council voted at the time not to actually close it, but about that same time is when this grant became available, and the grant applicant managers talked to some of the folks at the city of Martinez, and they said, yeah, actually, this is a really interesting, compelling project, and I think that you should move forward with fishing pier renovations in order, or use this grant to fund renovations to the fishing pier. So because this is a recreation grant, in addition to just the main thing, the main recreation amenity, there also you can submit a request to fund other amenities and other supporting activities in and around the main recreation component. So while the main component of this is actually rehabilitation of the fishing pier, what they're proposing to do is actually address all of this approach to the fishing pier, as well as this grassy area leading up to it. So there's actually quite a bit of space that we are looking at to apply for this grant. Originally, the deadline was December, so it was really close. It was going to be like 2.5 months. And in order to actually submit, you need to also include 5 public meetings. So we're talking like every 7.5 days, they were scheduling a public meeting. Sometime in November, we got word that they were postponing the submittal deadline to March, which is great. So they've been able to kind of space out some of these community meetings. There was a walkthrough on, I'm forgetting now what day exactly that it occurred, sometime in November, where we did the walkthrough here. We had about 25 people that participated in that. And from that walkthrough, we got this conceptual plan. So you can see that in addition to rehabilitation of the fishing pier, some of the other amenities that we're talking about is a bathroom, a publicly available bathroom, which is great. A bunch of new benches. We have a picnic space. We have some shade structures. We have some exercise equipment. We have reworking the ADA accessibility of these approach pathways. And we also are including some other things like interpretive signs, a native garden associated with this, kind of wetland feature here, as well as kite anchors to really embrace the culture that's down here, which is, the number of people that are flying kites. One great update that I got today from Mike Chandler, who's the deputy city manager who's been leading the charge on this grant application, was that they did do a walkthrough with some folks who agreed that we could also include a kayak launch or something similar to it as part of this grant application. There was a lot of concern because CEQA and other, permitting, not loopholes, but hoops that you have to jump through are very time consuming. And as part of this grant, you need to make sure that you have most of those hoops jumped through within 3 months of submitting the grant application. And anyone who's involved in permitting knows that 3 months is an insanely fast timeline for getting any of that done. So kayak launches and a few other components were a little bit scary to the folks that were on the team because they were worried that it would cause a delay in the permitting of it. But it looks like we've gotten the approval to proceed with that. So that's really exciting. Who was it? Diane, were you the one that had the question about this? Is there anything that you had specifically interested in seeing? You're on mute, Diane.
Sorry. Yeah, I just was concerned about what the plans all were for the marina. I have one, my son and daughter-in-law live on a boat in the marina, and they were just so concerned about the structure of the pier, and they knew they were going to be possibly dredging again. Do you know anything about that?
Well, so dredging of the marina is definitely not included as part of the grant application, and it would be run by the city, but it's a completely different activity. So you're not the first person to have mentioned that, and everyone's very aware that that's something that needs to get done at some point. One thing that we did talk about, and I'm honestly not sure because the walkthrough, the most recent community meeting was supposed to be this past Saturday, but they had 50 plus people that had RSVP'd, and they were really concerned about violating gathering rules and guidance.
Oh, sure.
So they just ultimately canceled the meeting. But one thing that we had talked about was whether or not the seawall that's right here, which is supposed to be blocking sediment inputs into the marina, would be one of the things that was able to be repaired. It's sort of unrelated. And so there was some concern about whether or not that could actually be part of the proposal. And because, again, our most recent walkthrough when we asked the question was a month ago, I don't know where that actually sits right now and whether or not they were able to get, feedback from the engineer to be able to include that as part of the proposal. If not, it's not off the table as an issue. It's just not going to be resolved as part of this grant application.
Good thing to talk to Brianne about if you have additional questions. Brianne, why don't you make me host? We're going to go over 10 or 12 minutes, and I'm going to do a short presentation about the election results. And I'll remind anybody who came in late that we've got a small turnout here because we had to change the meeting last minute because the installation of the city council was moved to tomorrow. When we had previously scheduled this meeting. If you're not on Thousand Friends mailing list, Mark will tell you more about that at the end here. And now I'm going to do a short presentation.
Seth, while you're preparing your slide, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I forgot to mention that while this past Saturday's meeting for the grant did get canceled, the next community meeting will be next Tuesday, which is the 15th of December. Which will be right before the regularly scheduled PRMCC meeting. And it'll be at 6 o'clock on Zoom, and it will be posted onto the agenda, the standard agenda page at the city as well, if anyone's interested in participating.
Excellent.
Thanks.
And so I'm just going to do a short discussion about the election results and why we think it's kind of a wake-up call for the Martinez City Council. Brianne hit some of these points, and so I may be a little repetitive on some of them. But we want to encourage people to run for council. Some of the hurdles that Brianne faced are ones that Thousand Friends is familiar with: how to do campaign reporting, where to find money, how to do the endorsement process, etc. And so we can help candidates who are interested in running for council. You get into politics because you want to lead or you want to make change, and that's also why Thousand Friends. Why Thousand Friends was formed, because we're not satisfied with the way politics is happening in Martinez. Now, Martinez is a small city, and most of us know a city council member. But if you walk precincts and you talk to people, what you find is that the city council is not well regarded by Martinez residents, and the reason for that is because they don't have much threat of not being reelected, and they do too many controversial things, whether it's Pine Meadows or going along with developers suing citizens, or finances, or not supporting some of the things that all of the rest of us support. The city council is not very well liked, but we're a small city, and that gives us some advantages. So we created Thousand Friends to elect better candidates, and as I said, based on three legs of a stool: conservation, parks and open space, good government, transparency, and overall quality of life issues. We've been doing endorsements now for 3 election cycles, and in that time, we've looked for good candidates. We don't always have them, and we don't endorse candidates who we don't think are good, but all of our endorsed candidates have won. So in this November, Brianne won in the City Council District 3. Jonathan Wright, and Horak Martin, and Jeremy Janelli all won on the school board. And we also endorsed Federal Glover in the County Board of Supervisors. That primary was in March, and then the general was in November. Now, Martinez incumbents rarely lose, and why is that? It's generally because they have name recognition, and it takes time and money to develop name recognition. If they have name recognition, they probably have contacts, and if you're a city council member, you get contacts. That helps with campaign contributions and endorsements and all kinds of other things. And so they have advantages that newcomers or challengers don't generally have. So again, Martinez incumbents rarely lose. What are the equalizers? Well, they're the grassroots. When you have people like Tim Platt or Mark Thompson who can help you with a campaign, or who can walk precincts for you, who have their own contacts they can bring to the game, that can be an important equalizer. Social media is much cheaper than printing things and sending them in the mail, so that can be an equalizer. If you're already well known, that can be an equalizer. If you have money, generally, if you can afford a campaign consultant, you can skip the step of developing name recognition over a long period of time. And so sometimes stakeholders will run somebody who isn't well known, but they use money and a campaign consultant to overcome those hurdles. So in 2016, 4 years ago, Nora Lee Gipner, and I'll say that we endorsed her at the time. You know, she was a challenger. She was well known in the city, and we hoped she would help bring change. That wasn't the case. She voted in lockstep with the city council almost 100%. She didn't lead on issues that we thought were important. But in 2016, Nora Lee and Mark Ross, they beat their closest city council challengers by more than 2,000 votes. And if you look at this, if you look at these figures here of how much they spent and how many votes they got, you'll see that Mark Ross, who had lots and lots of name recognition, got reelected with a very small amount of money, and Mark's famous for saving his signs and et cetera, et cetera. And I'll say that in this election, Mark was reelected, but we didn't endorse him. So we think he could do better. Nora Lee, on the other hand, was very well known, and she raised a lot of money, and that allowed her to overcome the normal situation of name recognition. And she won by almost the same amount of votes. Their closest challengers, Courtney Marcella O'Brien and John Stevens, were 2,000 or more votes lower for a low dollar campaign, for a high dollar campaign. And the point here is that there was an opening on the city council, and Nora Lee spent a lot of money and was elected. We actually thought Brianne was a long shot in getting elected this time because Nora Lee is popular. It's almost impossible if you don't get a link to find campaign contributions on the city website. And having transparency in campaign contributions and knowing who's spending money or who's who's supporting candidates is really powerful in terms of transparency and good government. So this November, Brianne won by 151 votes in District 3. We didn't endorse in District 2, and a relatively unknown person, Daniel Leahy, challenged Mark Ross and almost won. Mark Ross, who's been a top vote getter some elections, only retained his seat by 114 votes. What changed? What's the difference between 2016, when Nora Lee and Mark Ross both won by more than 2,000 votes over their nearest challengers? District elections. In February 2018, the city and the school board were forced, over their objections, to institute district elections. It comes from California voting rights legislation, which basically wants to keep various kinds of communities from being disenfranchised. Cities weren't following the rules, and a Southern California lawyer started suing to force them to follow the rules. And suddenly a lot of cities, school boards, and other special districts were having to run in district elections in order to get better representation. There wasn't a lot of guidance on how they needed to do it. And you can see that on the left, the city council did it in a really self-interested, gerrymandered way, because 3 city council members live downtown. They didn't want to have to run against each other. And so they made what California Common Cause called the worst district map in the entire state of California, and in order to preserve their seats. And so the biggest hurdle after district elections were started was most people don't know what district they're in or who their council member is. On the other hand, at the school board, they made relatively cohesive districts that kept neighborhoods together, and we think they did a fairly good job about that. 1,000 Friends and others have put before the city council a proposal, an ordinance, to create an independent redistricting commission in order to create better districts with the coming results from the federal census. Political boundaries will all have to be redistricted for congressional and other seats anyway. And so when that happens, Martinez should use an independent redistricting commission to make better boundaries. And Brianne is already committed to helping with that process. So as Brianne said, despite gerrymandered districts, instead of competing for 22,000 voters throughout the city before district elections, council candidates, and there are 4 council seats and 1 mayor's seat at large, they compete for 5,000 to 6,000 votes. Campaign costs are a lot lower as a result. You don't have to mail to the entire city to try and get elected, and you can actually walk more easily and reach people much more simply. Where do candidates come from? And this is part of the continuing problem with Martinez is, in most places, candidates are known quantities who tend to run because they were on the planning commission or they were on the school board, and they're going to run for the next elected office, whether it's city council or assembly or board of supervisors. But in Martinez, the mayor appoints almost all of the commissioners, and so most of the candidates are beholden to him in some way. Because of the problems with incumbency, because of the costs of running a campaign, because most of the candidates come from people that have been appointed by the mayor, it discourages people from running. Then when you face the idea of where does the money come from to run, people either get money from their friends and family, which can only take you so far, or they get them from 3 or 4 major sources: union locals, developers, garbage companies, or other kinds of special interests, including 1,000 Friends. The difference is that we don't have a profit motive in trying to get people elected. We're just trying to get people elected who will be better leaders. So the bottom line and the conclusion is, with district elections, even gerrymandered ones, with the example of people like Brianne winning with 150 votes, spending less than $8,000, Mark Ross being vulnerable, winning only by 120 votes or so, we're going to see more candidates running. We're here to help them and to facilitate those efforts, to provide funding in some cases, and to help with the redistricting process. The elephant in the room is that the mayor's seat still runs at large. So it's still a hurdle to raise the funds to run with 22 or 25,000 voters across the entire city. We actually think that the mayor's seat should be like the council seats, one of the districts instead of at large. We're considering how to address that, but we encourage candidates to step up and run. And thank you for coming to our meeting this evening. Mark is going to close up with a few words, and I'm going to, do you need to be co-hosting in, Mark?
I don't need to be, but pass it back to me. Okay, so I am just going to do just a few words. First of all, if you aren't on our mailing list, you can go to our website now, thousandfriendsofmartinez.org, and there's a button on the page, nice green shiny button that will let you sign up for our email list and get our monthly, if not more often, e-blasts that come out telling you about meetings such as this and other information. I'm going to echo what Seth has said. Thousand Friends has really come a long way in the last few years, and we think we're making an impact, and we really value all of your support, and tell your friends about this. It's a community effort, and we've all got to pull together for this. It's a hard battle to pull together and make the time to do this, but something good does happen out of it. So I appreciate you all showing up tonight, and we will be having another meeting a little bit more heavily advertised next time, probably in February, and hopefully we won't have to compete with a city council meeting. So thank you very much for coming, and stay safe, keep those masks on, and let's get through this whole pandemic in one piece.
Let's see if we had any last questions. We'll really encourage people to like our Facebook page as well, Thousand Friends of Martinez. That's where you can get the most up-to-date news from time to time. Send us your email if you'd like to be added to our e-blast list. But anybody have any final questions before we shut down for the evening? For us, for Bree, you name it.
I'd just like to say that very quickly now, the city council is going to have to act on a promise that several of them have made about putting in place an independent redistricting commission. A group in Martinez called Martinez Citizens for Responsible Government, actually with Common Cause, put together a city ordinance that establishes an independent redistricting commission. And they have presented that to the city council and asked the city council to talk about it and make it law. The city council has sort of been putting that off and pushing the can down the road. And very soon they need to step up and say, yes, we will look at that ordinance. And yes, we will establish an independent redistricting commission. It has to happen soon because that commission has to put in place new districts for the 2022 election. And they've only got about 9 or 10 months in which to do that. So that's going to be coming up quickly. And if you talk to city council people, please tell them you want an independent redistricting commission and you want them to get on the stick and make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
That is important to a lot of us. And actually, we did a, I'll try to send it to you. I don't know if you saw it, but I was contacted by PBS and we did an interview about the activism in the town, and they noticed that as well. So the gerrymandering became very known, and people are very interested in, fighting to get that.
Good.
Yes. Bree, any last words?
I'm not officially a city council person yet, and I do not have a city email yet, but as of tomorrow I'll be sworn in, and I believe my email address will go live on Thursday. So as soon as that gets up and running, please send me your thoughts and your questions and your suggestions and everything. And I promise I won't regret it. Saying that out loud. I really want to hear from everyone and make sure that everyone feels represented in this next 4-year term.
Thank you for all the speakers, Lynn Stevens, Mark Thompson, Brianne Zorn, Tim Platt, and we'll see you at the next quarterly meeting.
Thank you guys very much.
Everybody, have a good night.
All right.